Hi, my name is Frank Schaeffer, and back in the 1970s and 80s, I was my father, Francis Schaeffer's sidekick on the evangelical right-wing trail. We spoke to vast audiences, along with C. Everett Koop, who became Ronald Reagan's Surgeon General. My family was totally in bed with the religious right, founders of the religious right, and Republican politicians who at that time were just beginning to understand the possibilities of having millions of evangelical voters, and were constantly trying to find ways to get them to vote for Republican candidates. First, because of racial integration, they stirred them up, and the white Christians were starting all-white academies when integration came in, and when that didn't work out, they turned to the abortion issue, which we were part of. That's a long time ago. I am now a progressive activist working with Democratic candidates to get them elected. I crisscrossed the country in the 2018 congressional elections, working mainly for women candidates, 17 in all, speaking at various rallies and helping out. I'm very invested in this project, and very much I regret my past. I am sorry for my past, especially since the abortion issue, the litmus test we helped create, continues to be this horror show that now has resurrected itself in places like Alabama with extreme anti-women laws. Looking forward to the 2020 presidential race, I think it is absolutely essential that a woman president leads this country. You know, last time around, if it hadn't been for Russian involvement, and if it hadn't been for Bernie Sanders staying in the race too long and not endorsing Hillary Clinton, we would have had a woman president. Now, Hillary had problems. She was attached to Bill Clinton and all the baggage of political machinery, and Bernie Sanders had a point back then. It was time for a real progressive candidate to run as a Democrat. But this year is very different. This year we have Elizabeth Warren, and when it comes to progressive candidates, she's not some Johnny-come-lately. She's not only the real deal, she's writing the book. She's the only one of the Democratic contenders who is not only doing her homework, but if you actually take the time to go online and read her position papers, this is like reading statements by someone like Franklin Roosevelt back in the 1920s and 30s as he developed his philosophy of governance. She is a tremendous powerhouse of intellectual credibility and has the past leadership experience to be a great American president. She's not Hillary, she's not attached to Bill, she's not part of the establishment, she's not in bed with Wall Street and all these other things that Hillary was. So Bernie had a point then, but he doesn't have a point this year. A real progressive candidate, male, especially an old white fart, even older than me, this old white fart talking to you here, would drop out of the race and throw all his support behind the first woman president. And Elizabeth Warren has the intellectual firepower and the chops to do it. And so when it comes to the rest of the Democratic candidates, I feel the same way about that. We ought to get behind Elizabeth Warren. But in Bernie's case, I have a question for people who are supporting Bernie Sanders. What is he doing in the race this year? Why is this independent, who is not even in the Democratic Party, running as a Democrat, taking votes away from the most qualified woman who's ever run for the highest office in the land, and that's Elizabeth Warren? If you read her position papers and you call yourself a progressive, you are without excuse if you don't back her. Now, if she had 1% in the polls, like some of the other candidates, or was just a no-name that nobody knew and with no chance of election, sure, then back other people. But she is climbing in the polls. And this is really great news for people who regret their past like I do, and the misogyny that I used to be involved with in the 70s and 80s, albeit as a young man who should have known better. But Bernie Sanders is not a young man who should know better. He is an old white male leader like others, and he should know that now is the chance for a woman to be president. That in itself is the single most progressive step that America could take. Everything pales by comparison. She's great on the environmental issues. She's great on women's issues. She's great on national defense. She's great on foreign policy. And above all, she will right the balance for ordinary folks like you and me and bring this country back in line with a vision of greatness and power that has to do with empowering people. That is her message. Elizabeth Warren is the person that I'm going to get behind and work my heart out for. Now, if she loses in the primaries and Bernie or someone else wins, I will work my heart out for them, anybody but Donald. But Elizabeth Warren has the intellectual capability, the firepower, the guts, the stamina, and the presence to wipe the floor with Donald Trump. My name is Frank Schaeffer.